Thank you for joining. I can see we have some folks joining, so I'll just give us just a moment to get started. But today we're excited to talk about a topic that Mike and I have spent a lot of time working through and working on, about keys to becoming a digital first organization. And some of the there's really 4 fundamental keys to becoming and focusing on being a digital first organization. We're going to keep our conversation today primarily focused really around the digital experience and the content experience when it comes to sites and apps. We're not going to delve into the world of data and analytics. We're going to really kind of focus on what we thought this audience would be particularly interested in hearing and talking through. So I'm excited. This is actually the 3rd DrupalCon that I've had an opportunity to give a presentation, and this one in particular was kind of an interesting one for me. When I was first thinking about what I wanted to talk through today, I realized very quickly that in order to kind of speak to both the more business audience that's here at DrupalCon, as well as the more technical audience, I knew I couldn't do it alone. And as someone who has worked with ACQUIA for a long time, and I've worked in technology and marketing for a long time, I do have to admit that I am not a true Drupalist, and I am not the most technical person on this call by a long shot. So it's important to recognize what you can do and what you can't necessarily do. So I brought in the big guns. I brought in Mike Madison, who was very gracious enough to help contribute to this presentation. And what Mike and I are going to talk through is really some of those 4 key ways to be really focused on being digital first. And we're going to talk about some best practices that Mike's going to provide. We're going to talk about some high-level themes. My name is Eric Fullerton. I am the lead product evangelist at ACQUIA. And Mike, thank you for lending your Drupal and technical expertise to this content, to this presentation today. Mike, maybe you want to introduce yourself quickly.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the invitation. And I'm from the ACQUIA professional services team. So, a big part of my role is working with ACQUIA customers, with organizations heavily invested in Drupal, to help them sort of succeed in their digital vision and the implementation of Drupal in their digital strategy. So I'm really excited to be here. I've said for years I wanted to go to a European DrupalCon. This was not exactly what I had in mind, but I'll take it. I'm happy to be here today.
I think we lost your audio at the end of that, Mike, but I'm assuming that we're saying the next time we're able to do a DrupalCon in Europe, that hopefully we won't be able to have to do it fully virtually.
Yes. I would much rather do a DrupalCon in Europe as opposed to a European DrupalCon in Seattle, but I'll take it.
I hear you. So thank you, Mike, for that. And we're excited for our agenda today. I'm going to start by just doing a little bit of level setting, kind of talking about, what we have this evolving digital landscape and how that's really requiring today, instead of just encouraging organizations to focus on being digital, requiring them to be digital first. We're going to talk through the 4 keys to being digital first: performance, rapid development, agile content creation, and then optimizing the customer experience. We're going to have some great best practices that Mike's going to provide, and then I'll share some excellent customer stories that can help show and kind of when you really buy into and you focus on these 4 keys, the success that you can potentially have. So the first thing that I want to talk through is that, I think as we can all agree and all know, that the digital landscape that we're dealing with is evolving faster than ever. That was recently accelerated by a pandemic that focused on entirely, being able to engage digitally rather than the traditional way we would communicate and engage and participate with different brands and organizations. But this is something that's been a long time coming. We've been focused on different channels and different modalities, thinking about ways to create content, to build innovative experiences online, and to bring that kind of traditional in-person experience and try to, as best we can, bring that into something that's an online experience. So just a couple kind of level setting data points that I wanted to talk through. We did a customer experience report right after the pandemic had hit, and we were able to get some really great insight into some of the shifts that were taking place in response to this. And the first is that, organizations, we all know that we're engaging on more channels than we have before, but what was pretty interesting is the degree and the rate to which we're engaging on more channels. So 84% of consumers are using more digital channels this year just than they were the previous year. So of course we're doing more, but the actual rate we're engaging on these channels is very high. And in addition, we know that organizations are now focused on engaging maybe differently than they were before. And this is something that consumers and customers are recognizing, and they've really said that 3/4 of them say their digital experience with brands have changed, fundamentally changed since the start of the pandemic. And that as a result of this, or potentially tangentially to this, this kind of new engagement, this new online engagement has created an opportunity for organizations to be more willing to try new brands, because we're really that traditional loyalty for that kind of in-person experience has maybe gone away a little bit, and there's much more of an opportunity for organizations who are able to embrace being digital first. They have a real opportunity to gain some market share, and by building and creating the right digital first experience, the right digital first practice. And there's kind of a couple of fundamental high level challenges and problems that are associated with this. And the first is that individual sites are becoming more complex, right? We know that we don't have static traditional sites anymore. We have dynamic experiences. They have personalization. There's different modalities. Maybe they have mobile apps. Maybe there's commerce. There's all these different things attached, even to just one single site. But simultaneously, we know that there are more and more sites than there's ever been. Most organizations have many sites. Some have dozens, some have hundreds, some have thousands of different sites. And this is only going to become more over time. And we know that we have our corporate websites, our microsites, event sites, blogs, product sites, all these different sites and all these different solutions, all these different ways to engage and communicate online. And one of the big problems is that all these properties, they tend to be different. A lot of times they're supposed to just fulfill the individual requirement of that experience. Or I want to build a forum, I want to build an extranet. And that oftentimes mean they're legacy systems, and they're oftentimes very, very different under the hood. And this is where Drupal is, we know that, of course, we're all in an agreement that Drupal is an amazing CMS. It's the best open source community in the world. But this is somewhere where Drupal can actually really help solve some of these large scale traditional challenges around the individual complexity of sites, in addition to all of the different sites and experiences that we're responsible for building and launching and creating today. And Drupal is really well positioned to help solve for this, because if organizations can standardize on Drupal, they're going to be able to meet all of those requirements for all the individual sites because of the incredible power, customizability, and flexibility of Drupal. But they're also able to simplify things like their training. They're able to reduce maintenance costs. There's lots of other these benefits to organizations, like streamlining security, optimizing their internal resources. And critically, they can do that without sacrificing the quality or the flexibility of requirements. And that's going to allow you to do more things, and to do more things more quickly. And we have lots of organizations. I'll actually go through a bunch of different customer stories, but these are just some recent ones that I liked for those who are embracing Drupal in Europe, to really try to think about how to solve for some of these problems. We have Airbus, for example. They've just begun using Drupal and using ACQUIA to unify all of their divisional sites, all these different sites and properties onto one platform. And their goal is to invest in open source for that flexibility, but also potentially to reduce some cost. And of course, we have the NHS. This is a blood transplant organization, and they were able to use ACQUIA were able to provide free consulting services to them in response to the pandemic, and to help them build a blood donation request form using Drupal, deal with the massive volume of requests that they were seeing in response to the pandemic. The University of Oxford and the Saad Business School has been a customer of a long time, but they've actually expanded to support the entire university, starting with just one part of the organization, then expanding the entire university, including the Oxford Vaccine Group, which we think is really exciting. There's other examples of different portals that are being built by Elanco around being able to have these new best in services for helping pet owners manage the health of all their different animals, and that's been a great success for them across the globe. And then, of course, Fitness First is an organization in Germany, and they've been able to use and work with Drupal and ACQUIA to pivot all of their individual gym memberships and drive all these organizations and be able to launch and deliver online classes on a Drupal platform. So those are just a couple kind of high level examples of what I was talking about around Drupal. But let's get into our 4 keys, because that's really the exciting part of our presentation today. And the first kind of level set I want to do is that we all know that web performance is absolutely critical to the user experience. Consumer expectations are high. People do not like to wait. We know, and we've seen this borne out by dozens and dozens of different statistics, but we know that a 1 second delay in conversion can mean a 7% reduction in conversions. And if your site loads faster, you have a higher conversion rate. And it's also something that can affect your revenue. If your site makes $100,000 a month, and I'm just using that just as kind of a level setting piece there. If you're making $100,000 a site on your month, a 1 second improvement in page speed could bring you as much as $7,000 increase a month. So there's revenue benefits associated with this as well, in addition to just kind of brand and experience benefits. So we know performance is important. Mike, I know you literally talk to people, you talk to customers about this every single day. So I was hoping you could kind of provide some insight and expertise around performance, what you can do, and some of the things you can put yourself in a good position to be successful around performance.
Yeah, well, and performance is something you have to keep an eye on, because it's one of those topics that's just so big and so all encompassing that it's kind of like losing track of the forest when you're in the forest, right? It's just all around you. And thankfully, Drupal is quite performant. Out of the box, Drupal gives you a lot of caching mechanisms that you can use. It gives you a lot of really great sort of hooks that tie into many different services on your hosting platform. So, from a purely like what's available ecosystem, there's a lot out there. But performance, unfortunately, is something that regularly kind of gets put on the back burner. And I think one of the things that's so important about what Eric was talking about in terms of having a business impact, you only get a chance to make one first impression. And as more and more of your digital experiences are the experiences that your customers are having, or your customers' customers are having, if somebody comes to your website and that experience sucks, they're going to go to one of your competitors, right? And unfortunately, you can't go back and fix performance after the fact. I mean, if you can technically, but if you've already lost X number of customers because of a poorly performing website, like you can't put the genie back in the bottle. You can't go back in time and undo that. So, performance is something that is critical. It is something that should be tested sort of throughout the development process. And it's something that really, truly every member of your development team has a hand in, whether you're doing site building. I was on a project recently where a site builder forgot to add an image style to a display mode. And when we were doing load testing, we found that some of the pages on the website were trying to serve 6 megabyte images. Multiple 6 megabyte images. So you can imagine how slow that page was. Whether you're a PHP or a backend developer, right? There's some really boneheaded things you can do in code that will absolutely destroy performance at scale. If you're loading every node on your website on a page, for instance, or if you're a front-end developer, if you're not properly applying the library's API and caching your dependencies, if you're using kind of some funky, JavaScript or not tying in properly to, an API for JavaScript, like there's just a lot of things you can do that will really adversely affect the performance of the site. So even very early in the process, developers really should feel ownership of the performance of the platform, even if it's not explicitly defined as a true functional technical requirement.
And there are some things here where ACQUIA can kind of help as well. And just to reference, of course, I won't spend time talking about ACQUIA Cloud. It's been the foundation of ACQUIA's business for a long time. We believe it's one of the best cloud for Drupal hosting. But it's not just about application performance. It's not just about hosting. You can also have things like CDN, which are bundled in to help with highly trafficked sites. But I know, Mike, one of the things you also work with is around cloud scalability in PS, kind of working around preparing companies, organizations to make sure that their site's highly performant prior to launch. So can you talk about that for a second?
Yeah, of course. So we call that a launch readiness engagement, and it's usually split into two parts: security, which we're not touching on today, but like pin that in the back of your head. Security is also quite important for obvious reasons, and performance. And what the performance assessment does is it takes historical data from your analytics or whatever previous logging information you have about like traffic and loads. It takes your Drupal application and it takes your production infrastructure and it throws load at it to try and make sure that your code is performant, your servers are appropriately sized, your CDN is configured appropriately if you have one. And look at, I mean, like if you think about some of those numbers Eric was talking about, like 80+% increase in traffic, at a certain point, you're probably going to have to throw some additional hardware at those platforms if you're seeing that big of an increase, right? But, and this is coming from a hosting platform here, folks, throwing hardware at load problems is not the most efficient way to deal with load problems, right? If you have inefficient code, if you have poorly executed code, if you have a misconfigured Drupal instance, you're going to get way more returns on your money if you go in and optimize your site for performance, and something like a launch readiness, a load testing engagement can help you find that so you can fix it, which will ultimately save you money on your hosting costs.
Awesome. Let's talk about a quick example here, and I really like this one. This is King Arthur Baking Company, and as folks who may have picked up the hobby of baking can agree, lots of folks have started baking in the time that they have really been spending a little bit more time at home picking up new hobbies. And there was a day in March when the folks at King Arthur Baking went onto their platform and they saw that they had set records for the highest amount of traffic that they had seen in all year, over 365 days, higher even than their traditionally highest day, which was Thanksgiving in the US, people looking up recipes and all this stuff. And then the next day they went to the platform and they saw record highs again. And they saw record highs in traffic for about 2 months in a row. And while you could kind of imagine that maybe more people would go to your site looking up recipes and learning things about baking, this was kind of an unprecedented increase, a 260% increase in traffic in the sessions that were delivered. And there are kind of two pieces to this, right? The first was by making sure that they had worked effectively within their own organization, and then also happened to be with ACQUIA about making sure that you're doing kind of the right things initially in the project when it comes to performance. That was really, really important, and that helped their site stay up in a time when it had never been more critical, more people engaging with their site and their content than ever. But the other cool thing here is that what that allowed them to do was to not have their team provide tons of resources focused on managing the different performance of their site in real time. Because they had done all that work before, they were in an excellent position to succeed. So what they were actually able to do is to focus their teams on actually building out and creating new content in digital experiences. They had rolled out a bunch of different videos that they shared online. They had interactive, they had actually an interactive call center that you can call. They rolled out. They did a bunch of baking how-tos, a bunch of new recipes. And what they were actually able to do is, rather than be challenged by this massive uptick in performance that they weren't necessarily expecting, at least not to that degree, they were actually able to take advantage of it because they didn't have to take all those resources and kind of put them on kind of that team to think through and figure all that stuff out. And they were able to work with their development teams to really make sure that they were creating kind of these newer, more innovative, best-in-class experiences on their site. So a really kind of cool story there about what that allows you to do, not just in terms of keeping your site up, but in terms of optimizing all those folks when you do see that. So I'll move on and kind of talk about leading into our next key, and this is around innovation. And we are constantly charged and focused and thinking about building new innovative experiences online. We see organizations that are constantly trying to do all these amazing things in the digital space. And we're always responsible for driving more innovation because we have to. But in order to do innovation, you need to be able to develop rapidly. I could probably talk about this a little bit, but Mike, I know you can do it a whole heck of a lot more justice because of kind of your technical expertise and your experience actually rolling this out. So I'm going to pass it over to you to talk about the importance of rapid development and how you can kind of start bringing that together within your organization.
Yeah, and this is something I see time and time again at, you know, major enterprises, higher education institutions, a lot of the folks that I've had the privilege of working with over the years. Every organization has a finite amount of resources, right? And you have to decide, do you want to put those resources into a really awesome mobile application or a homepage or, you know, whatever user experience, or do you want to invest in your DevOps and deployment pipeline? And I can tell you unilaterally, most organizations lean towards doing more feature development, focusing on enhancing the overall user experience of the site. And that's not always the wrong choice. But when you think about something like a global pandemic, when all of a sudden you do need to be able to be very responsive and be able to deploy very quickly and safely, when you think about a really significant security patch or drop, and there have been a couple of critical security releases for Drupal 8 and 9 over the last few weeks, when you don't have the ability to rapidly do an update or rapidly do development, test and make sure that that new work isn't going to break anything and then deploy, you can really quickly end up in what I sort of describe as like deployment whack-a-mole, right? Like you do this deployment and now you're going, okay, is the site still up? Are we still working? Okay, yep, good, good. Like so there's this happy little Zen area where you want it to be fast, but you also want to be safe and secure. And if you don't have a good deployment process, if you don't have good automated testing or good manual testing in a worst case scenario, and if you don't have a DevOps team or a DevOps process that is repeatable and secure, when something like a global pandemic comes along, or when the holidays come along and everybody's in a big crunch and you need to get new content or new features out, at the end of the day, the more manual and the slower your processes are in the development DevOps world, the slower your time to market's going to be for everything you're trying to do on your platform.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, there are some tools that ACQUIA has to help in its developer studio, things that can really help support more rapid development. So there's tools like BLT, which we've seen lots of organizations see value in. Pipelines, another one. A more recent one actually is Cloud IDE. And I know we've had lots of different organizations and groups working on this. Mike, I know you've worked with I worked with a bunch. I'm not sure if you want to share an example of kind of some of those dev teams that were able to use tools, whether it be ACQUIA's or otherwise, to actually see this to fruition.
Yeah, I had an opportunity to work with a multi-billion-dollar enterprise last year, and they were doing a lot of things right on their platform. But one of the things we noticed very early on was that their various development teams were all using different technologies for local development. Some of them weren't doing local development at all. Their deployment pipeline was not consistent, and a lot of what we focused on first and foremost with that customer and their teams were standardizing around a specific set of technologies for their development team to all work on and having a common deployment pipeline. And ACQUIA Developer Studio is one great option if you happen to be an ACQUIA customer and you are maybe struggling with a local environment. Maybe you don't have the right level of access. A lot of our federal customers run into this. You can't run most of the VM solutions locally without sudo on your machine. But at the end of the day, having a common development environment wherever that is, having a good continuous integration tool wherever that is, that's the important part. And if you need one, you don't have one, if you're with ACQUIA, we'd love to talk to you more about ACQUIA Developer Studio.
Yeah, and one of the things you said that really stuck with me, it's like when you're able to do this, it's like you're really getting all your teams swimming together when you have that kind of standardized development environment and deployment.
Yeah. Well, and in that particular instance with that customer, so much of what was happening wasn't that any of the teams were not doing good work. It was that they were fighting each other because they had such inconsistent development processes.
Right. When you have a consistent development process, you can actually do some pretty amazing things. I have a couple examples that I want to talk through here. This is one that I really like. It's actually a museum in Boston. It's actually a very famous museum in Boston, and obviously, right in the immediate impact of COVID-19, some of those closings, people could not go to museums anymore. So of course they had relied on lots of foot traffic And in just a couple months, they had needed to create and develop and build an entirely new experience. They actually work with a customer, a Drupal shop, Third and Grove, who's done some amazing work. But they were actually to work and build with this kind of rapid development process. They were actually able to build an entirely interactive museum experience online. So in just a short amount of time, just a couple months, they went from getting no foot traffic to build kind of this beautiful interactive museum, virtual museum friendly experience. Saw a massive increase in that because they really bolstered out the way that they were creating and kind of the interactivity of that experience. And they were actually able to see an increase in purchases from virtual visitors, which in that time was absolutely critical to their bottom line. And because they were able to make their digital footprint match their in-person experience. Mike, I know you really like this one, so I don't know if you wanted to add anything about that.
Yeah, no, I mean, just the thing that's so exciting to me about this is, this is a great example of innovation in an uncertain time, right? So, the fact that this museum was able to quickly turn around something unexpected, get it out there, and obviously we see a 40% increase in traffic to a completely new thing that a year ago nobody would have cared about, right? So I mean, this is literally, I think, one of the great success stories of 2020 for Drupal. This is really exciting to see that people are able to do this kind of innovation with our technology.
Yep.
And keep their patrons coming into their museum to experience the things that they can't do in person.
And like we talked about, in order to do that, you have to have your teams, swimming in the right direction, consistently, not fighting against one another, and that's really important. Another example I really like is a company we work with called Mars Wrigley. It was like June or July of this year. I think they had a little bit more time to think through this, but Halloween is the biggest holiday for them. It's absolutely critical to their bottom line, and something that this kind of reality, this challenge is brought on by COVID and kind of these in-person trick-or-treating experience that really wasn't going to happen in the same way that we had traditionally hoped or thought that it had in previous years. So what they were able to do is work with a really agile development process. They built an entirely new application. They called it Treat Town, and it is an entirely virtual trick-or-treating platform. It allows folks. It even allows for parents, but most of it's focused on young kids being able to do some virtual trick-or-treating, to be able to redeem credits for their candy and snacks at retailers all across the U.S. It was actually it was built on ACQUIA's platform, but the thing that's really interesting and exciting about it is that it was all powered by Drupal. So they were able to create all this content in Drupal with their CMS and then actually push that out to the application. So they were using kind of that same content process, which is really critical. And they saw some tremendous success for the months of September and October. It was the #2 most downloaded app in the food and service section on the apps store, on the App Store. Even more people downloaded that than Uber Eats, for example. So they saw a great uptick. They saw really great engagement. They've seen some great press stories. So if you want to check that out, I'd really encourage it. And it's another great example of rapid development in a time when it was more critical than ever to do. So we know that, and I kind of just spoke to this a little bit, but content is really the heart and soul of the digital experience. We're engaging with more content than we ever have before. The average B2B buyer actually consumes about 13 pieces of content before even beginning to think about making a purchase decision. And in response, organizations are now producing more content to meet this increased demand for customers. And we have to have an approach in place to be able to create this content quickly, but also adhering to and following our brand guidelines and an approved workflow and approach. And Mike, I'll pass it over to you to talk a little bit about content architecture and the importance of that.
Yeah, well, and for any of you that have been paying attention to the Dries Note and all the other exciting things coming out of DrupalCon for the last 5+ years, Drupal 8, Drupal 9 give you so much power to build content, right? It is a content management system, and it gives you a lot of flexibility. But one of the most common issues I see with content at organizations is what they're really building is HTML websites. You have these content teams or these design teams or these marketing teams that want these really bespoke one-off features for a given landing page or a given splash area or whatnot. And the development team has to get involved to build those experiences. And they're literally doing, HTML that gets rendered out as a block, or they're, God forbid, doing HTML directly in the WYSIWYG editor or whatnot. And in some ways, we're getting farther away from the vision of Drupal by doing that, right? The goal is to have a content person whose expertise is content, not development, be able to come in and build that really unique, really powerful digital experience without any code. So, one of the things I always like to talk about is governance and thinking about getting everybody on the same page. This is not an attempt to like restrain your creativity or stop you from doing these really cool experiences. But the goal is to give your development team a lot of lead time, build out the features in such a way, think about component-based design, so that your content team is able to go in and create this experience just by filling out form fields in Drupal without having to do any code. And you really have to do that by having your stakeholders, your design team, your content team, and your development team sort of in lockstep. That way, if there is something coming, hopefully we can avoid a fire drill. Hopefully we can build it the right way. Remember, we just got done talking about rapid development. We just got done talking about performance. All of these things start to build together and click together. You can't do, performant, good, accessible, pick all your buzzwords that you want design when you're running in a fire drill.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what I really like you said is it's like that approach actually doesn't help an organization unlock the true power of Drupal. And by building your platform the right way, you shouldn't need your development team to do that if you're thinking about a component-based process and you're having folks that are on the content team actually contribute to that.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, like, if you want your development team to have to go build every single experience that you're going to deploy on your website, like, go build a React app. Like, at that point, you're fighting against what Drupal's good at. And again, Drupal is so good at simplifying that content management experience. Why not focus on a content architecture that gives that power to your content team, so that you're not building websites out of HTML and JavaScript and all these really complex things that a lot of marketers and content folks don't have the skills to do.
And you can absolutely do this in Drupal, and that's great. We have lots of organizations that we work with who have really robust Drupal practices. They want to build a custom layout builder in Drupal, and they want to do things that way, and that's absolutely great. That's fantastic. That's the power of Drupal. We do have a solution that's more out of the box that's going to help enable really faster content creation. That's ACQUIA Site Studio. And the real objective here is we want more organizations to use Drupal, and we want more people within an organization to be able to use Drupal. And this is one way to potentially, free up these critical developer resources, Mike, like you were just talking about, and really more easily enable the marketers and the content editors. The goal of really kind of sharing digital work, because when you build a great application and digital experience, and Drupal is at the core of that, like that is fundamentally good for Drupal. But a tool like this, whether you want to do it with your own custom build or your own custom approach, that's absolutely fine. Some organizations would want to do it with a more kind of out of the box model, and that's fine too, right? The options and the flexibility are really important here. And this is going to help you get that content team, the design team, swimming in the same lane, so that development teams are not required for content creation. That doesn't mean you throw away your content architecture, that all the stuff you just talked about, that is super important. But this is one particular way that you can really free up those developer resources, so that your marketers are the ones that are using drag and drop functionality to build simple pages, especially when we start thinking about things like little microsites or event sites, really freeing up those resources for the biggest, most innovative projects and having your development team work on that. One example I really like is Bear. And they're an organization who had been working with Drupal for a very long time. They're actually using another product of ACQUIA's called Site Factory, because they have thousands and thousands of sites. And they were undergoing this massive digital transformation. And their goal was to bring on hundreds of sites into this new platform. And for them, they were really trying to figure out, how do we do this more efficiently and more quickly? And yes, we have some good Drupal expertise at our organization. We have some really smart folks. We have some excellent Drupal Drupal developers. But at the same time, like we want more people to be able to access and to create content and to contribute to the digital experience that we're building. So what they were able to do is they did actually end up using Site Studio in this example, and they had this core team of Drupal developers. They created all these reusable components, and they also created this master style guide. And what that allowed them to do was they were then able to share that across 18 different assembly agencies within the organization. And some of them had little Drupal development skills. Some of them had zero Drupal development skills at all. And what's exciting, and this is a success story for Drupal, really, is that they were able to bring on 500 sites live into the platform in just about 6 months. And they were able to, they have larger scale, plans to build about 1,800 different sites and bring it on to the platform. And I think what's really exciting was you start talking about that innovation versus content creation requirement. They were able to cut down their time to market by about 50%. So they're actually able to bring into scope, into their 2021 planning, a lot of great initiatives that they weren't even thinking about being able to do previously until 2022 or even beyond. So that's something that's a great story there. Let's get to we're going to kind of move into our final key here. And I'm just going to level set it before passing it on to Mike again. And the thing here is, so now that you're thinking through and you've built a site that's really performant and you're able to, make sure that you're able to develop rapidly because you have the right process in place. And now you can kind of create content effectively and more quickly with more people doing it. How do you optimize that experience? And one piece of it is optimizing content. We know consumers, they want brands to understand them and how to approach them. 80% are more likely to purchase from a company that offers something like personalization, relevant content to relevant people as they navigate the site. But it's also about more than that, right? It's also about increasing the efficiency of your content production within your organization so you can create content and then publish it to multiple locations. Mike, I'll pass it over to you to talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, and just quickly, I know we're winding down the hour here, but when you think about your content architecture, the next step is to think about where does that content go, right? More and more organizations today don't just have a website. And I think Eric alluded to this in one of our first couple of slides. If you play the recording back when you watch this, maybe you have microsites, maybe you have a digital app, mobile apps, you've got an intranet, an extranet, all these different places where you might need content. And building one big Uber site that has all of these different touch points in it may not be the right fit for your organization. So if you have different systems, but the same content, how do you get that content to different places? And the ability to reuse content across multi-channel using the multi-site use case is something that is quite challenging. Drupal does give you some basic building blocks out of the box with JSON API, but something like ACQUIA's Content Hub could certainly help you if you wanted to move in that direction. The other thing to consider across this enterprise, across all of these different touch points, is that you may not want to show the same content on the same page to all of your users. It could very well be that, based on who that user is, what they're interested in, where they're coming from, you want to show them something different based on information you've already gathered about this user. So, I think the last step to building a truly good digital experience is to think about, now that we've got this content, what can we do it to tailor personalized experiences? And I think, Eric, you said it exactly right. Like, what can we do to cut down on our sort of management footprint for our content team so that we can more broadly, use and share this content?
And we talk a lot about like conversion rates as it relates to personalization. That's certainly an important and a part of it. But also, as we're starting to see more and more digital kind of like sprawl, we have larger sites, they're bigger, they're more complex. Being able to provide a better experience might just be to get more relevant content to that person that they want to engage with and helping them navigate a more complex digital experience than before. And one way we can do that is with ACQUIA personalization. And what's interesting here, and what I really want to call it out, is that you spend so much time thinking about your content architecture in Drupal, the way you want your site to look and feel, the way you invest in actually building out all of your Drupal content. And the goal should be to make sure that if you are doing personalization, if you are trying to make relevant content appear to the right people, that you're using Drupal content to do that. Because if you're not, then really you're just kind of adding on some HTML from kind of some additional tool that maybe doesn't have the same look or feel or approach. I mean, I can actually talk about an example. I was working with someone who's manages the website for a pretty large organization, and they went into work. They went onto their primary.com and they saw content that they had never seen before on the homepage that was not approved, that did not meet brand guidelines, and didn't really follow kind of their master style guide. And this person was like, "This is not like." We want to be able to do personalization as marketers, but we also need to make sure we're adhering to the right content structure. And that's where, having some type of personalization solution that is really specialized and optimized to work with Drupal content and Drupal workflows is particularly important. And a good example of this is an organization called Wateraid, and they rolled out a kind of a personalization project recently. They have this. I mean, really have an amazing vision. If you haven't heard of them, I would strongly suggest checking them out. And they're located in Europe as well, and they are really focused. They were really trying to make sure that they got more. They're always trying to get more donors, right? That's kind of one of the most critical things that they're trying to do. They're trying to figure out, how do we get the right content to the right people? How do we help them navigate our site so that if they do just want to donate, we make that really easy for them. But if they want to engage with new content to see the different initiatives that we're working on, that we're able to do that. And they were able to roll out kind of a comprehensive campaign. They were able to use all the Drupal content. Their site is beautiful. They were able to use the right Drupal content, follow that kind of content architecture that we had talked about earlier. And they were only doing their personalization with pre-approved Drupal content, so that the marketers were kind of had full reign to kind of do the things that they wanted to do with the right content. And they saw some really great results in terms of, drastically increasing the click-through rate of all their personalized content and call to actions. And they started a lot of increase in kind of their confidence scores. They wanted to do some testing as well. So personalization, part of it is right content, right person. The other part is helping to test and determine what content is right and most effective. And there's a really great example from Wateraid about when you have a unified approach to content creation in Drupal, and then you're able to think about personalizing that experience and reusing content. They saw some success there. So we're going to close it out. I know, Mike, I'm going to be honest. I kind of like having the last word. It's usually what I like to do, but because I am particularly appreciative that you jumped in and you helped me out with this one. We talked about a lot of things, went over a lot of stuff. So I'm going to kind of put it to you as maybe our first kind of Q&A. What would you wrap up and think about as kind of the takeaway for what we talked about today?
I appreciate it. And, I think if I could sum it up, it's expect the unexpected, right? It's really easy for an organization to be willing to invest time and money and resources into something tangible. Again, let's improve the homepage. It's less easy sometimes for your executive team to sign off on DevOps enhancements, and you got to balance those two. But again, if 2020 has shown us anything, the unexpected has become the expected this year, and making sure that you are prepared for big jumps in traffic, making sure that you do have a development team that can deploy rapidly, good content architecture, et cetera. All the things we've talked about today are just going to pay off in the future for your organization.
Yep, absolutely. Great. Thanks, Mike. I appreciate it. And thanks to everyone for joining and for spending some time with us today. If you do have questions, just because we're about time right now, we'll jump over to the booth and I'm happy to kind of answer some of those. And there's some other great folks at ACQUIA and who have some incredible Drupal expertise who can provide some more context. But thank you for taking the time, and thank you for joining us. I really appreciate that. And Mike, thanks for providing and lending your expertise to this presentation. I really appreciate it.